Hey everyone, you're listening to the Breezy Moms Podcast, a weekly show that chronicles the adventures of motherhood. I'm Candace. Now let's start the show. Hey guys.
Hey.
I'm so excited to be here. How are you?
You're always super excited.
I am. That's
it's always
the whole
super
point.
enjoyable too.
I know. Well, today I wasn't on the floor, so that's a step up. But I was really excited. James bought me some swag for the show.
You have swag. She walked in here and I'm like,
my own face on my own chest. It's pretty exciting.
She literally took the Breezy Moms logo and had a shirt created out of it.
No, I didn't do it. James did it because he's the best.
James,
he really is the best.
He really is. And he had you come over with some skinny margarita.
I know. It's a whole thing. He was like, you have to tell me what happens. He said, Tommy's going to lose his shit when he sees that.
I lost it. I was just like, I think I did the highest pitch scream ever. Not to mention that, when Candace walked in, the first thing she notices, like, as she's coming into my kitchen, is a piece of poop from one of my babies.
But it literally happens every single time. I think they just get excited to see me.
They do. I think it is.
I have that kind of effect, like loose bowels. I don't know.
Yeah. You babies, my babies, your babies, they all poop.
Oh my God, I love it.
So, I'm super excited because you have a very, very awesome show today.
I know. In a little bit, we're going to have a special guest on. His name is Michael, but we call him Uncle Michael because he's near and dear to our hearts.
We can call him Uncle Michael.
We'll have the whole world calling him Uncle Michael. But yeah, so he's going to be on, and he's a consultant, and he does like executive coaching. He does coaching at organizations, but he has this thing about self-coaching. So for those of us like laymen who can't afford the executive coach, or moms, or, I feel like sometimes it's hard for young people to feel like we're in a place where we need executive coaching, like legit coaching, even though we need help. It's hard to either know whether you can afford to get that sort of thing, or if you are really cool enough to need it. And so this idea of self-coaching is really, really exciting to me.
I didn't know that self-coaching was
a
possible.
thing. I didn't know it was a thing either.
I guess we're going to have to find out.
I guess that in tune with, having a good network, having some good mentors. I bet all of those things sort of fit nicely together, and it's a good.
So self-coaching is almost like you would also have to have some sort of like a good self-foundational,
right?
Foundation on self, right?
Yeah.
Like self-motivation,
But maybe you can learn all of that stuff, growth mindset. So we have no idea. Clearly, we don't know what it's about, but
we're going to find out.
We're going to find out. So stick around, and Uncle Michael will be on in a little bit.
Definitely. But in the meantime, I do have a question for you.
I'm listening.
So, Miss Candace, how are the boys?
The boys are good. Well, the boys are always good. Let's see. School starts soon, although now I'll have to revisit this because it actually starts next week. But we did orientation today, and this is the first time. I mean, it's only his second year of school, but this is the first time I didn't go. So James went solo and did the
introducing
super dad thing. Yeah.
Do they do that whole thing when they all line up and they give the kids high five and stuff?
I wasn't there. I didn't hear about that. I don't think so.
No, because there's some schools and stuff that are doing on the first day of school when all the kids get dropped off, they all walk in and all the parents line up and give the kids high five.
Yeah, I've seen that. Well, it wasn't actually the first day of school. It was orientation.
Oh, okay.
So maybe there's still room, but school has started. It's just pre-K starts a little bit later. I imagine there's a whole lot of funding related stuff, and we're all super bummed is not even the real word. Probably pissed off is the better description of how we're all feeling, is that we're generally used to our pre-K program for pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 being an extended day program. So it's from 7:30 to 5:30, which makes it really possible for parents who are working, right? Mm-hmm. There were several cuts to our state budget and then to our city budget, which falls over into our schools. We've lost a bunch of teachers. The librarian is going half time or something like that. So we are not going to have the extended day. Now school is from 9:25 to 3:25. Who the hell can do that?
Yeah.
What is that? I'm a daycare provider and I'm not sure that I can do it. Like, it's insane. And then the pre-K classes are not going to get library. I mean, it's why people talk about cities the way they do. So we are trying to figure out what we're going to do in the meantime, because it sounds like for the first couple weeks, I'm going to be trekking it a couple blocks with like a handful of kids to get Lincoln to school and get him picked up so that we can
make it work.
Make it work, yeah.
Wow.
But other people are, at least I have the flexibility to do that.
Well, most people don't, and that that puts a burden on the parents because here you are telling people, like, I remember when they came out with this 18-month program, right? If you were receiving state assistance, you could only do so for 18 months, and then during that whole 18-month period, they would encourage or give you resources so that you could find a job and become gainfully employed. But then the issue becomes that if you're employed and you still have to figure out and jump hoops just to get your child into school.
Yeah.
And you can't find a job that would accommodate or be as flexible as it needs to be for you to be able to manage your child in a job. It's like, how do you expect people to find a decent office job or something in where that's even possible, And then they end up in some low-paying job. Mm-hmm. Because
or low quality childcare.
Yeah, and because that's the only thing that they could find that fits within their schedule, and I think that they're setting them up to fail.
Yeah, I don't believe at all in our like social services process, the welfare thing, which lots of things fall under welfare. People like to forget that Medicare falls under welfare. All of those state benefits are all paid for by the state. Like, they're all welfare, but people focus only on, families, and particularly families of color. But, I don't believe at all in that system, because as soon as you're able to make a little bit of money so that you can make things work, they pull back on your on your subsidy, which then the gap is never quite filled, right? Mm-hmm. You make a little bit more because you needed more, and then they take away some, which means now you need even more. So it's not actually, that whole like welfare to work program has never really been a thing that worked.
Yeah, I saw it as a failure. I mean,
and that's
I'm sure that there are some success stories. But
yeah, I think it's been pretty shitty since at least the 90s, and definitely for people of color. I don't know all the super details about it, but it sucks.
So tell me. So
the boys are good. All of that is to say they're going to be fine because we're going to figure it out. And thankfully, I have a schedule and a job that allows me to do what I want, right?
Yeah.
So we'll take our outside walk time. It's gonna be terrible on a terrible day. Mm-hmm. They're saying that there might be a little bit of like, it might just be for a few weeks until they figure out their budget or whatever. So it might not be for the whole year, but for a little while we'll figure it out. And then, I guess push comes to shove, you don't have to be in school until you're 5. Like, he's not in kindergarten yet. This is not a necessary thing. So if we have to pull him out, we'll pull him out. He'll stay home. Like, half the country is at home until they're 5. Like, I'm not worried about it. I feel like we have some great options, and we will just figure it out. And I hope that people around are able to reach out to their networks and make sure that they are also able to figure it out.
I agree.
It's a childcare in this country is not, is laughable, I would say.
I definitely agree.
Yeah. And I'm a childcare provider, so I get it. I get it.
But there's a difference between, childcare, right? Mm-hmm. You get paid to be a childcare provider. So when someone brings you a child, you have all the necessary things in place to be able to stimulate their brain, their mind, and things like that. Sometimes because of budget constraints or whatever, people can't afford childcare, and childcare becomes grandma.
Right.
And grandma shoves them in front of a TV on Sesame Street.
My soaps are on. And, sorry, shout out to all the grandmas out there, really taking care of business.
My grandmother babysat me forever, and as long as she kept me fed, filled to the gills, and, in front of Sesame Street, I was good. I wasn't out in the street doing some crazy stuff. And I think that, it's
going to be all right.
Parents today have a little bit more understanding of what it means to start stimulating your child's brain at an early age and doing things in the home. And that's not something that our parents did.
Right.
Or if they did, not something that we realized they were doing.
It's true. I mean, on the flip side, we might have taken it too far. You know, we're like uber worried about kids being behind because they, you know, a couple weeks ago I was stressed out because Lincoln can't read yet and he's 4.5. You know, like he's not even in kindergarten. He's 4.5, but he's not even going to kindergarten because he's got like a late birthday. Yeah. But like he's 4, he doesn't need to be reading. Kids who can read at this age are advanced, and not everybody has to be advanced. It's gonna be all right.
Okay. Wow.
So yeah, he's good and excited. His response from orientation this morning was, "Oh, all my friends from my other class are there." So that was nice.
I want to be there too.
Yeah, so it was nice. And Emery is good. I keep looking at Emery and thinking like, is it real that a year from now, this time he will also be going to school? It's a very strange thing to be looking at. I kind of stopped putting him in onesies, and all of a sudden he looks like a straight little dude. Like really, just like a little dude. He makes these little faces. He has these little responses that are like grown man. They're basically my responses on a little tiny 2-year-old face. It's hilarious. Sometimes when I have to just check myself because it's definitely a mirror, right? He definitely does exactly what I do.
And he's at that age. He's like a sponge.
He's trying so hard to talk. He wants to say everything that Lincoln says. And he's just being my favorite is he comes over for kisses and he like grabs your face, both hands, you know, and like pulls you in, and then he walks away. He's like, I'm good.
Kids will be kids.
I know. So it's been a good week. I will also say I had a moment today, just like a self realization. I don't know if that's really the word, but remember I talked a couple weeks ago about imposter syndrome, where you just feel like you're never really doing it right. So one of my kids is in school now full time, and he just comes to me in the morning and in the afternoon. And the last couple of days he's been saying, "Oh, we didn't get to go outside today because it's too hot, or there was a half day or whatever." And it's only been a few days. School just started last week. Anyway, he came in today and he was bouncing off the walls. He was talking like he was on speed. Like he said the same thing to me like 3 or 4 times in a row. Like I think his mom drew something on his water bottle, and so he told me that story 2 days ago. He told me yesterday. Today he told me like 4 times because the water bottle fell, and I was like, "Oh, pick up your water bottle." He goes, "Oh, there's a scratch on it. You know why? There's a scratch on it. My mom put the blah, blah, blah." And then Lincoln said something. "Oh, there's a scratch on it. You know why? My mom did it." Blah blah blah. Like 3 times the same story in 5 minutes, and just basically jumping over like just off the walls. I've had him for 6 weeks. I've never seen him this way. And I just had a moment where I was like, "Oh, I believe in what I'm doing." Like we spend so much time sort of running around outside and giving him free time to sort of do whatever it is that he wants to do. And I have never, ever in the whole 6 weeks that I've had him, have him be in this sort of like hyped.
So what did you do?
Well, we and then it was storming, and it was actually like 1,000 degrees today, so we couldn't go outside because the other kids were sleeping. We just had to deal with it inside. But now I'm thinking about the next couple weeks, like how do I make sure that when he gets here off the bus, it's timed with when we're going outside in the afternoon, because the kids don't actually in our schools don't get to go outside all the time. Like my sons, they don't go outside if the nurse isn't there, and the nurse is only there 3 days a week or something like that. So there are definitely days when they don't go outside, and then weather prevents them from going out other days. But it just was this moment of realizing that whatever it is that I'm doing is allowing him to get out this energy, because it was like night and day. I'd never seen this kid before, because he's had a chance to, like to kind of do what he wants and let out this energy in a way that after sitting at a desk for however many hours in a school setting, he wasn't getting.
I can tell you one thing. That's why I'm not a child care provider, because I'd be like, come here, baby boy. I got a Xanax for you. I'll calm you right down.
No, that's terrible.
Yeah, let's sit you down here. Take this. This is a little magic pill. Here's some water. Or do you want some juice?
You're going to jail.
You want a juice box? Sit down. Relax. No, but I'm kidding.
No, but so he's great. It's just it was a very clear night and day moment for me that made me think. James has said in the past that all this time we're spending outside is a luxury, and that there have been several articles and lots of people talking about how kids are in front of screens and like video games and doing other things, or even if they're not in front of video games, just kind of stuck inside because. I told you, on the weekends we have so much stuff to do, I don't really get a chance to just sit outside with the kids. And that's what parents are dealing with. They're working all week, you got to do all the things on the weekend. So, and then schools again, it's like 22 minutes of recess that's just like outside.
And that's why I find myself not struggling, but how would I say? I find myself pushing myself more during the week. Like I get home and I'm usually mentally tired and stuff, and I want to be able to like sit down and just maybe take a nap for 30 minutes or whatever. But then I start neglecting other things that need to get done, and I've sort of kind of been working on getting more done during the week. Like when I get out of work, pushing myself to do that load of laundry or clean this room or do that or dust this, so that when the weekends come,
you can actually relax.
I can relax and not have anything to do with it. And it's getting better, but it's not where I want it to be.
Oh no, I hear you. I hear you. But you know what might help that?
What?
A little self-coaching.
I think that, yeah.
I think it sounds like exactly the thing that self-coaching might help us to sort of like figure out how we can manage our time and our goals and things we want to do. I think it will, I think it's timely. So why don't we just jump right in?
Yeah, we can do that. Absolutely.
So let me introduce Uncle Michael, his real name is Michael Ansa. He's joining us all the way from San Francisco.
Hi, Uncle Michael.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Uncle Michael.
So great to see you. You make me feel so old, Uncle Michael.
No, but it's not old. It's love. It's all love. Like I've been calling you Uncle Michael for like 15 years. Easily.
That's true. I'll accept love.
So Uncle Michael's related to my husband.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
full transparency.
Yeah. So, and the way that things go, which I think most, I would say Black families, right? Like he's actually James's cousin, but he's Uncle Michael. Like we're not going to say cousin Michael. It's like he's older than us. He's awesome. He's cool. Like it's a little bit of reverence.
I have a lot of like third cousins and like daughters and sons of my grandmother's sister,
right,
that I call auntie this, auntie that. So it's
real. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I've been dying to have you on the show.
My pleasure. I'm really excited just hearing the two of you talk about your moments of self-realization. Got me excited about the topic. So I'm really glad to be here.
It's something that I am trying to get more comfortable with because a lot of times as, I am a woman, right? Like I always have to default to this. As women, you defer from accepting a compliment or realizing when you're actually doing something well. I talk a lot about imposter syndrome. And so I'm trying to, stand firm and recognize when you need help, but also when you're like kicking it.
Great. Yeah, it's I think we all need an external view on who we are and how we operate in the world. And that's where coaching comes in for me. And I really believe, I'll talk a little bit about what coaching is and then what self-coaching is, but I really believe we all need the ability to do some of this for ourselves, but also people in our lives who can be objective and help us to see that part of ourselves that we either refuse to see or can't see. And so coaching becomes a way to do that. And so I can just keep talking.
Yeah. Well, you tell me, let's start with a little bit like, remember we said, what is it that you, like, how did you get here? What do you do? What is your day job? How is it that you are, like, what are you doing?
Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, really interesting. So I moved to the U.S. from Ghana when I was 19, and I went to chaplaincy school. I went to divinity school in Boston.
I just learned that last week.
Yeah, I was a chaplain for 5 years, and it was, at the time, it seemed to me the thing I wanted, and it stopped making sense after a while. But I think through that work, I really discovered how to be with people, how to be with myself, and really what it meant to have this human experience and to support others along the way. And I think over the years, my career has transformed into other things. And currently I'm what I would call an organizational consultant, because I do three things. One is individual and team coaching. So I coach leaders in organizations around how to really step into their leadership in a new way. Often these are people who are in some kind of job transition. They've been given new roles, and they need to really switch how they're operating in order to succeed. And so I'll come in to help with that. The second piece is working with intact teams. So a lot of that work is around group dynamics, team effectiveness, how to really govern as a team, how to really manage dynamics as a team, and to do it as an intact team, not to do it as individuals pushing others around or one person taking control. And the third part of what I do is what I call the organizational work, which is really how does an organization look at its talent and move people around the right way, meaning develop people, but also make sure they're progressing people in the right way so that people stick around. So that's in a nutshell what I do now.
Cool. And it's funny, I've thinking about starting as a chaplain and now being a coach. Like, a chaplain's basically a coach, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it like totally makes sense. It's this idea that when you're moving forward, it feels weird to do every step you take, every job you take feels like, how can I be doing this when this is what I was doing before? But someone told me a long time ago, like, don't worry about the different steps you're making, because you can always explain it. Like, you can always explain back to like the path that it's created. So you don't have to worry about this decision that you're making. Like, is it the right one? Does it fit with what I've been doing before? Because your recap and your story, you'll always be able to talk about it in a way that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think it's really important. You and I, Candace, talked about accidental progression in life, what feels like accidental progression. Right. And what that is essentially is you walk into an experience that doesn't make sense, right? You feel like you're in a situation that doesn't make sense. And when I was younger, my strategy around that was to yell, kick, and scream. And and what I've recognized just over the years is just to trust that inner wisdom and that sort of circumstance, whatever it is in our lives. And I don't mean to philosophize, but what's tended to happen for me personally is, I worked as a chaplain. I went into education. I became a dean of students. Basically, I was a coach, right? And have progressed into this area of coaching, which happened accidentally, by the way. I never really wanted that title or wanted to do this work in particular, but that's what people kept asking of me. Will you coach my manager? Will you coach this person? And I had to say yes to that. And
you're good at it. Like, we call you in like a family, in a familial way, right? It's just a thing. Some people are good at it and you don't even realize it.
It makes sense now for me. And but even I need a coach, right? And that's why I want to talk to your guests today, because I think I'm just imagining not everyone is a parent or a mother or a father, but they, I think one of the things that happens when you're in that experience, I'm not a parent myself, is your world can become very small, and you forget about yourself if one isn't careful, right? And I think the power of coaching, what I call self-coaching, is the ability to have a set of tools that you can apply to yourself at any given moment in time in order to do three things: to observe what's happening in the moment for you and the patterns that are occurring in your experience in your life, to write them down. As a result, to gain some insight, self-awareness. And then the third step is around then, if you have that data, then how can you make some shifts based on that data? Ideally, we should all have a coach or a therapist, but sometimes we don't. So I think what's come out in the self-coaching literature, which I'll talk a little bit about, is that this is an augmentation, or this is a kind of emergency kit we can all have in order to accelerate our purpose, our experience, the reason we're here on the planet. Mm-hmm. And I'd actually like to make a plug for a book that speaks to this. It's by a guy called Joseph Luciani. He's a clinical psychologist. And the book is called The Power of Self-Coaching. And he can pay me commission later. But I love this book because it really democratizes the idea of coaching. And it says, hey, you might not be able to afford a coach, or you might have a coach and this might augment that. But here are some steps you can take in order to get out of a rut or to reevaluate your life.
And so can you tell me a little bit about what's the difference between coaching and therapy, or coaching and
I love it.
venting, or coaching and, kicking and screaming? Like, because, there are all these different, and coaching in church, like coaching in your pastor, like, can you identify for us, like, what coaching really means?
Yeah, excellent question. I knew you were going to ask it. So I'll start with a caveat that there is many different definitions of the difference between therapy and coaching, as there are of many other things. So I think you'll ask a lot of therapists and coaches, and they'll define it a little differently. But this is how I think of it. I see coaching as a partnership that is about three things: creativity, it's about inspiration, and it's about self-discovery, right? So the way we get there is slightly different as coaches, but a lot of our work is based in, I'll talk about my work, is based in sociopsychology, anthropology, and business or organizational literature. So I like to think of my work as, it's like taking a class, right? You have an issue that you're not sure about. You go to a coach. They help you look at sort of the full spectrum of what that issue is. And then you come up with a plan. And the coach becomes somebody to not just cheer you on, but really help you to be very diligent about how you're going about that, and give you what feels like a syllabus sometimes, but it's a path to follow. And the way you do that is through weekly, bi-weekly sessions. And I do things from observing people's meetings to, doing assessments on them, where I talk to, 30 people around them, and then provide them with that feedback to, get involved with your department in order to see maybe things that you're not paying attention to. So it's a very active engagement. The way I see therapy is a little different. I think therapy appears to me, and just from my own experience of therapy, to be much more focused on psychodynamic issues, psychological issues, sometimes psychiatric issues. And it's a very session-based engagement, meaning you have your 50 minutes. It's very good. I have a therapist. It's very good, but I see it as much more specific, often, but not always, less multidisciplinary. And I respect, don't get me wrong, I respect therapists, and I need my therapist. And therapists are all different, like we are as coaches. But I find it a little bit more focused in that way. And I do things from, I don't exactly work out with my clients, but I walk with my clients sometimes. I draw with them sometimes. I listen to music with my clients sometimes, because that experience might be part of the pathway to their insight, right? So a long way of defining what you just asked me.
No, that's great. That's great. So, do you find coaching to be more about like professional as opposed to personal, or can coaching be both professional and personal?
Well, actually, the way coaching, we have a governing body called the International Coaching Federation, and the way it defines coaching is coaching inspires both personal and professional potential. Yeah.
Perfect.
So you're going to have people who call themselves life coaches.
Yeah.
Who are really about the personal development of an individual. And it's not what I do, but there are a lot of life coaches out there. And then you have business or leadership coaches that are often more in the workplace and working in a business as a consultant. And then, there are career coaches who help people between jobs or folks who are stuck in a midlife kind of, who do I want to be when I grow up?
Right.
So there are all different kinds. And I think the basic premise is multidisciplinary, and it's usually experiential in some way. And it has this aspect of sometimes being psychologically geared, but not always, right? So that's how I look at it.
Okay. All right. So then we heard a lot about coaching as something that you do, right? You do for other people. How do we transition to this idea of self-coaching? If we can't really make the budget work for a life coach or a career coach at the moment, what does self-coaching look like? If you can, I don't want to boil down all of your work to 3 points, but as a starting point, right? Like as a nice little, like we're gonna dip our toe into self-coaching to see if it's something that we can handle. What does that look like for us?
Yeah, very good. So I would start with, there's actually a great little assessment. If people go to self-coaching.net, there's a great little assessment you can take to see, are you in need of coaching, even self-coaching, and where you might be stuck. So that's a step I would recommend, is that people go and sort of self-assess there. I would say the first step I'll give you 4 steps. The first is to really define what your stuckness is or what your challenge is, right? And often people will define it in a very shallow manner, right? I need to make more money, or I just need my husband to love me more, or it could be, and what I would do with that as a coach is to dig deeper, right? So the Japanese have this exercise of the 5 whys, where you ask why 5 times, and after the 5th time, you finally get to what it's really about, and often what it's really, if you ask why 5 times of the challenge, I just need to make more money. You might get to a response that's something like, I need to feel better about myself and to fulfill my purpose on the planet. I mean, that's what it comes, right? So that's where I would push my client is, give me the presenting issue, but ask yourself the 5 whys and get to the real point. So that's the first step I would say for people, is define what your challenge is, do the 5 whys, and get to the real deal, the real issue, so that you're not solving for, I would say, something that's not really that deep or that as important as you might think it is. Okay. The second step is something I do formally for clients, but you can do for yourself, which is to take an inventory of your strengths and weaknesses. And I would say a great way to do this is, first of all, do it yourself first, and then check it out with people who you really trust and who really care about you, right? So often your family is not the best for this exercise, because I just speak for myself. My family's not objective about me,
right?
Because they need me in specific ways that often will leave me in the same position. So I would say take an inventory and ask people you think can be objective about it. And where I'd like people to look on the weakness side is where they get trapped in patterns of blame or guilt or doubting or your own hostility or your own sense of imposter syndrome. So I would say on the weakness side, just notice your own patterns around negativity or getting stuck in the same place. And, I speak for myself. If I was to be honest about the last 20 years, I would say it's the same script to different cast, right? Mm-hmm. We have similar patterns. So identify what those patterns are. So that's number one, right? So, sorry, number two. So number two is inventory of strengths and weaknesses. Number three, and this comes from Joseph Luciani, number three is to stop listening to the noise. So what is the noise? The noise is people, experiences, scenarios that keep you in the same place. Any kind of dynamic that stops you from paying attention to yourself. Experiment what it's like to stop listening to that for an hour, for 2 hours, for 3 days, and note what that experience is like, right? So if you can focus in on what's the noise in my life and what would it be like to tune it out.
Could that be like your own complaining? Like if you tune out your own complaining for a little while or other people, like what kind of like an example?
Yeah, very good question. Very good question.
I'm really into this one.
So your own complaining can be one. If there is a way to keep yourself honest about that, right? Mm-hmm. So I find that people often, I give people this exercise, which sounds like madness, right? So when my clients have this negative self-talk issue, right? So some clients have a voice in their head, which might be the voice of an old coach or an old parent, an old sibling that says negative things. And then they end up saying it to themselves unconsciously. And what I say to them is write it down every time you hear that voice. Tell it to shut up. Tell that voice to shut up, right? And this is the super ego, right? That's giving you that negative self-talk and tell it to shut up. And note it, write it down every time you do that. And at the end of the week, let's see how many times you had that voice and what you said back to it. Mm-hmm. And it's a great exercise in tuning out the noise. Mm-hmm. And when I've done this for myself, I've noticed that it's less powerful every time when I hear whatever that complaining I do or negative self-talk I do is, it's less powerful every time. So that's an example of tuning out the noise is if that noise if that complaining, as you put it, is you complaining internally, can you tell it to shut up every time and write it down? And when you come sit with Tom, say, hey, I said shut up 5 times to myself today, right? So it's a way, I find that every time we create distance between our beliefs and our patterns and who we truly are, which is our essence, we gain more power because as we know, and I'm not the first to say this, our thoughts are not us, our beliefs are not us, right? Our emotions are not us. So the more distance we're able to create between negative emotion, negative thought, our own stuck beliefs, and who we are, the more powerful we get and the more clarity we have. So that's,
I feel like sometimes those things can just be habit. Like you always say it this way, or when this person says this, I always respond this way, and you just do it out of habit, whether it's good or bad, and you just, it's hard to break those kind of habits.
Yeah,
especially
it's
something like negative self-talk is a serious, terrible habit that a lot of us have.
Yeah, I think it's part of our human experience, right? None of us had perfect parents. None of us had perfect upbringings or perfect educational circumstances. we've internalized what's been projected onto us, and we do it to ourselves. All of us. There isn't an exception. So part of healing and part of self-development is getting traction on what those thoughts are and what those voices are and what those beliefs are, and cutting the cord over time. It's a lifetime's work, right?
Yeah.
But it does start with being aware that they're there. I think there are people walking around who don't even know that. And then articulating what those voices are. What are they saying? And the third part then is actually actively negating those voices, right? By surrounding yourself with love, talking back, writing back, tuning them out, focusing on what's positive in your life.
Okay. All right. So tune out the noise. All right.
Tune out the noise.
And number 4?
And then number 4, I would say, is it's sort of a version of number 3, but it's really thinking about how to let go of whatever it is you were stuck on. How do you let go of it? And for me, there are 2 ways to let go. One is to create an action plan around where you're trying to get to, right? So really thinking tangibly about small shifts you can start to make that, and the best example of this, Candace, is, when you're trying to start a workout routine, right? And you don't start with, running 5 miles, right? In the same way in coaching, you talked about negative patterns or negative voices or a complaining pattern. You start with something like, today, I'm going to catch myself in the act. There's a term I use of catching yourself in the act of complaining, and I'm going to stop it in the moment.
I try that every day. So, every night I go to sleep and I go, okay, tomorrow is the day. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything.
Right. Well,
and then as I try to catch myself in the act, their super ego is like, no, we will not let this stand. It's so hard.
Well, yeah, the super ego doesn't want you to get healthy, because otherwise it doesn't. If you do, it doesn't have a place. But what's it gonna do if you get better?
Right? Like you put it out of work. Go take a nap. Go relax for a minute. Let me be. Let me live.
It's gonna go on unemployment. So it's like not happening. Yeah, it's hard, right? So everything I'm saying is hard. And ideally, everything I'm talking about works better with a therapist or a coach. But for those of us who can't, or maybe it's not yet, or I need to wait, or I have kids at home, this is just to know some of these patterns and techniques are really helpful. I think the other is, so create an action plan, starting with small steps that help you catch yourself in the act. And if you have a good friend who is self-aware, or, a partner who's self-aware, a significant other who's self-aware, that you can really work with without blame or competition around some of this stuff,
like
right?
Accountability.
Accountability. Exactly. Have them help you catch yourself in the act. The second is something I call changing. Well, this is also from the work of this psychologist I really like so much in his work. It's around changing the channel. And changing the channel is just about, in the moment, do something different, right? In the moment, think a different thought, put on some music. In the moment, surround yourself with the things you love. In the moment, play a song you really like. In the moment, something we all do, call a friend who just loves you unconditionally and talk. So changing the channel is a conscious move that says, I don't want to be in this place and I need to make a shift, and I'm going to actually physically or emotionally or tangibly do something different. So I think I started with the first step, which involves defining what your goal is, and then asking the 5 whys to get down to what the real story is.
Mm-hmm.
The second step is really charting your weaknesses and strengths, taking an inventory of what you got, and also your own reflexive patterns, right? What are the patterns? Where are the patterns where you get stuck? Not so that you can beat up on yourself, but so that you can see them in plain sight and decide what you want to work on. And then I talked about stop listening to the noise, and then letting go through either changing the channel or really taking a definitive step to get out of whatever rut you're in.
Okay. I love it. I love it. So, so you were talking all this time, and we have a thing at my house where we call it, Tony Robbinsing. Like, I'll say to James, "Are you trying to Tony Robbins me?" Like, you're a coach. You're like a real life coach. What do you think of Tony Robbins?
Tony, I'm embarrassed to say I haven't listened to a lot of his work. So here's what I think.
Or are there any people, like, he's the one that comes to mind. Is there anyone that you think of? Like, I think about Tony Robbins because I guess he would be like a life coach, right? Is there anyone on your radar that you'd be like, oh, Tony Robbins is just for show? You should really listen to this person.
Yeah. Well, I really love someone called Byron Katie.
Okay.
And Byron Katie, so Byron is Byron, Katie is Katie, I think.
Okay.
And you can either listen to her podcast, watch her YouTube videos, or read her book, which is Loving What Is.
Okay.
And she has this technique. I'm sorry to give you so many techniques, but it's called it's called 4 Questions and a Turnaround. And it's really about, in the middle of an experience where, stuff has hit the fan and you're back in this pattern, she has 4 questions that she's asking you to have about whatever belief that you're stuck in, whatever cycle you're stuck in. And that is it true? That's the first question. The second question is, can you absolutely know that it's true? And the third question is, how do you live when you think that thought? And the fourth question, which is more of an instruction, is now turn that thought around. And she gets into a somewhat complex series of ways in which you can turn the thought around. I would say, in my own experience, she has been somewhat revolutionary in a very practical way, right? And if you think about it, it's kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy in 4 questions.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that for myself, it's been a great way to have a quick toolkit that I know that I can use on myself. I recommend it to clients sometimes to progress. I think Tony Robbins, I don't know a lot about him. I'm sure he has great stuff. I mean,
you're giving me
he's
this
done
like
so well.
Mariah Carey. I don't know him. Like this vibe. Have you seen that GIF when they asked Mariah Carey if she knows Jennifer Lopez, and she's like, I don't know her.
Well, he's
like
doing something
from one
right.
coach to another. I don't know him.
I don't know her.
But I think if Tony Robbins works for you, why not?
That's
what I would say.
Well, sometimes you have to the Tony Robbins, what's her name? Dave Ramsey, and what's the woman's name who does? I listen to Dave Ramsey, so I never remember this. That other lady with the crazy voice and the blonde hair who does the money stuff. Anyway, you need people to listen to sort of get you interested, and then you can find the other other people who are like you need the superstars in order to bring you in, and then you can kind of learn about these other people who are doing the work in the background. So
absolutely. And I also believe people have people are looking for different things, and I think different teachers and coaches work for different people, so it's not a one size fits all for sure.
Well, I'm so glad that you are on the show tonight, Uncle Michael. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I mean, we're here to
My
have
pleasure.
fun. We're here to have fun, but we're also here to give you some stuff, right? Some real knowledge and information. I love that my network of people, and I've only been doing this for a little while, and I feel like every week the people that I have come on, they amaze me and surprise me with all the sort of knowledge and cool stuff that they're doing. So I'm really grateful for my village and just I'm happy to share it with everybody else. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I love what you're doing. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay.
Bye.
See ya. Bye. Bye.
So I have to tell you that, I've been jumping around. We're having technical difficulties with the live stream right now. For whatever reason, there's lightning storms outside, so that could possibly be the reason. But I was running around and stuff. But while I was sitting down, and what I was able to capture was one of the most important things is asking yourself if what are you surrounding yourself with, and what's within your control, right? Because that's also part of the self-assessment process, to realize that you can only make change on what you have control of.
Right.
And that's very important. And I think that
in my last job, we called it staying on your side of the court. Like imagine it as a tennis match, and I don't want to say whoever you're fighting with, but whatever's happening, like you can only control what's on your side of the court.
Yeah. And to me, when you start thinking about all the other elements that he brought forth, and putting it all together, it really gives you a very general idea of ways that you can really self-assess and ways that you can really put yourself on the right track, pushing forward, and being able to not only motivate yourself, but change the way that you do things and have a different perspective.
I really like the 5 whys. I was trying to understand the questions and the turnaround at the end, but the 5 whys made a lot of sense to me because like I have a really dusty treadmill in my basement. We have like a whole dusty gym. And I feel like I just keep saying like, I don't want to be fat, but it's not enough to get me downstairs like the 20 steps into my own basement. So I need to ask myself a few other questions because clearly I don't want to be fat is not a good enough motivator for me because I'm just like, thick thighs save lives. We're fine. Like it's true. All right. So it's this idea of sort of getting down to the deeper, like if I asked myself 5 whys about why I wanted to lose weight, it would probably end with, I don't like this twinge in my knee, right? Like what is this 35-year-old tick in my knee that's happening right now? Like, it doesn't seem right. But I feel like that's a far cry from like, I want to wear smaller pants, right? Like I don't want my knee to hurt anymore when I'm 35 because hopefully I have a long way to go. Right?
So you remember Trish, right? It's funny that you mentioned this, or Nick, who produced one of your episodes for you. It's funny because Nick just turned 31, right? And I said to him, you're going to learn how to define your 30s because every single new thing you discover about yourself, every pain, every ache, you're going to literally turn around and be like, it's the 30s.
Right.
It is definitely the 30s because seriously, like throughout my entire 30s, it's like every year I discover something new and something weird, right? And I would attribute it to my 30s.
Like I can't drink soda anymore because I get like a gross blemish or a pimple or something. Like it's like I can't eat. We have this place in Boston where we went to school called Anna's Taqueria. Like we're too old for Anna's Taqueria anymore. I think like the enzymes in my stomach are gone. I just like can't manage Anna's Taqueria anymore after I turned 30. So like definitely things are different.
Yeah.
But sort of getting back to what Uncle Michael was saying, it's just like it's important to get to the why that you want to do something. I think I've seen in some other places, like what is the why, why you want to do something? Because the why is way more important and is a stronger motivator than the initial, like, I don't want to be fat, or I don't want to be mean, or I don't want to complain anymore. Like, why don't you want to do the thing? And once you get to the real why, you'll actually be motivated to make some changes. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I think it's really hard to objectively self-reflect.
Yeah, self-reflection, self-motivation. It's like when initially you mentioned the concept, I was like, wow, that's very hard to be able to say, okay, this is what I need, and here's how I'm going to make a change, right?
Very hard. And some people are really good at it. I will make a plug for James right now because he's pretty good. We're preparing for this trip to Chicago, and he's like, I'm trying to think about all the different places where we have to stop and eat so you don't get hangry over the course of the trip, right? I'm like, well, good for you. After so long, you know that our worst trips are when we try to go like so many hours in a row without stopping to take a break and eating because I just can't manage it. Like the way my hypoglycemia is set up,
but
like
it's
I
not
just
only
can't
that, like,
handle
because you
it.
could pack sandwiches in a car and just drive it straight through. It's that break, though.
Yeah,
you know, that
break.
being able to get out the car and stretch and sort of kind of, oh, look, a new scene. Like I can see you through the window, but now I can see you, I can feel you,
something.
Yeah, it's. I agree.
But
good job, James.
Yeah, good job, James. So it's really important, or else you end up in the same way where you're like, every time we travel, we fight because Candace is hungry, right? But it starts off as like she's just angry, and then we realize that she's hungry, and once she eats, then she's better,
she's
right?
Fine.
Like
it's like that Snickers commercial.
I know.
Have a Snickers. You're starting to sound like Betty White.
It's so real. So grateful to Uncle Michael for introducing me to this idea of self-coaching. And then we'll just make a plug again for actually going out and getting a real coach or therapist because like there's value. And the idea that those two things are two separate things, right? Like there is a thing as a coach, there is a thing as a life coach, there's a thing as a therapist. Like they're different things for a reason because they affect different parts of your life. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to manage your self-care and add one or many of these things to your self-care repertoire because in the end, like none of the things happening around you function if you are not in a good place. So shout out to Uncle Michael again. Thanks so much.
Shout out to him. He's amazing.
All right. So let's move right into Mom Tip of the Week. MomSoHard Tip of the Week. So this one's a little bit of a silly one, but I'm really into it.
They're usually the best.
I know, they're the best. So have you seen, it's not new at all, but like the little wine that comes in the little caddy and it's like they're bigger than a nip, but they're smaller than a bottle, right? And they're like 4 of them in a little caddy. I used to think that was like Lush size because it's bigger than a nip. It's like my friend Kima and I have this thing from Will and Grace, Gypsy Rose Lush, which is like you just like Lush all the time. But sometimes you just need a glass. Sometimes it's been a long day and maybe it's just you. Maybe it's just you and you just need a glass. And who wants to open up a whole bottle of wine and waste the wine, right?
Nobody. And sometimes you just want to try it too. So
just want to try it.
You could just try it without committing.
These little caddies, and maybe the store lets you try.
Well, that's
wines.
why. So there's this new wine service now that you're speaking of this, that you can literally go and build your profile of what wines you would like to taste, try, and what they do is they send you samples, right? And based on the samples that you get, you rate them, and then they create this profile for you, and then they start shipping you wine every month for a set fee. You get a box of wine.
All about the subscription.
Yeah. And so you get wine delivered right to your house. And what they do is that based on the wines that you tasted and you rated, they keep sending you those types of wines in different vineyards, different years, different ages. And then you just keep trying them and then you keep rating them. And as you rate, the more you rate, the better the experience becomes
for you.
Tailored for you. And I've had a couple of people actually try the service and they say they're fine with it.
That's
except
cool.
when they need extra.
Right.
And then you get that
I really like that one.
Like, yeah, no, you can't order that much wine. I'm like, why not?
Right.
Like, you go through a glass, I go through a bottle.
Right.
It's like, don't judge me.
Yeah, but sometimes I just feel, so this happened because the other night I had a friend come over and do a guest class for my program, and so I wanted to give her like a nice thank you, and so I made her a little thing. I'm really into these treasure trays And then I picked up this wine. And when I saw the little thing, I was like, she's at home a lot. Her husband's a doctor, so he's on call all the time. So it's like sometimes after a long day with 3 kids, you just need a glass of wine and you don't want to feel bad opening up a whole bottle. Right?
So you just open up this little tiny one.
You just open up this little tiny one. It was just enough for her and I to share. We both got like a little bit, and it just felt like the best little, it was just like a little moment. And for me, also, I was running out of my house. Was like, hey, I need a minute. I'll be right back. And then popped over to her, and we had like this little moment. And I just felt like, again, it's another example of how moms and friends have to really stick together and show up for one another, because it really matters.
It's that village, and that village doesn't always necessarily mean that it has to be surrounding around like the topic or the need for the village surrounds or is built around your children. It's built around a support system. And sometimes that support system requires a glass of wine.
I know. Or a friend of mine popped over the other morning unannounced. She's like, hey, you want to go out for breakfast? I was like, yes. Yes. Please take me away. So really, whenever you can sort of reach out to people around you. I think some of my best mini experiences have been unplanned, because you really can't, like, some of these things sometimes you have to plan, right? Because you need coverage. But some of these other things, like, we could not have planned it better than it worked out as an impromptu thing. So definitely. And the other thing is, I think sometimes you say to someone, oh, I was going to call you the other night because I was driving by your house on my way to pick up a blah, blah, blah. And I thought maybe you were busy, so I didn't call. And the thing people always say is, oh my God, you should have called. You know what I mean? Like,
and now that I'm here, let's do something.
So I hate it. It always feels like a missed opportunity, because like I was lonely too as I was running to the supermarket to pick up milk. You know what I mean? Like, and so sometimes you catch people at a bad time and all they can say is no. And other times you end up with these like accidental, wonderful little mini get-togethers. So the
hashtag mom tip of the week, or the MomSoHard tip of the week is
buy the wine in the little tiny caddy that comes like 4 of them in a little thing. They're smaller than a bottle of beer. I don't know what they're called, but there's probably a fancy wine term for it, but there are 4 of them in a little caddy, and it's just enough for 2 glasses, which is either good for sharing or for yourself.
So in other words, put a little variety in your life.
Put a little variety in your life. And yeah, and definitely as moms, especially if you've been nursing for the last several years, like all I need is a glass. And I'm just like, woo!
I'm done.
2 glasses. I'm like, oh my God.
Becky, look at her. Yeah. Glass of wine.
Right. So I don't need the whole bottle. The whole bottle. And the next morning when Emery's got his hand on my face and he's going, what does he say to me now? He said, let's go. What do you mean, let's go?
Let's go.
5:30 in the morning. Where are we going?
I'm not going anywhere. You let's go, meaning, mommy, I'm hungry. Get me up.
Exactly. That's exactly what it means. Let's go downstairs. No, nope. It's 5:30, and I had a whole bottle of wine last night. Nope.
Not a whole one.
I know, but a whole little one.
A whole little one.
A whole little one will keep your parenting right where it's supposed to be. So, on that note, you have anything else?
I don't.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up on time this week.
Yes, I'm very proud of you.
I know. I've been doing a good job.
You have been.
All right, so anyway, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Catch us every week at 7:30ish on Digital Stream Radio, and click on Listen Live. I'm also all the places where you find your podcasts. And I'll be here next week. So talk to you soon. Bye. This show is produced by Tom Ortiz at Digital Stream Radio. It's available for download on Podbean. Follow us at Facebook at Breezy Moms Podcast, or email us at breezymomspodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, don't stress, just breathe.